afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Graff, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief at National Jeweler. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler's new webinar series sponsored by RDI Diamonds. Today's session is hosted by Senior Editor Brecken Brandstrader and features three guests, the GIA's Nathan Renfro, Billie Hughes of Lotus Gemology, and Danny Sanchez of Danny J. Sanchez Photography. Before I turn it over to Brecken to get the webinar started, I just want to let our attendees know that if they have the question, you can type it into the Zoom Q&A box. That's the box at the bottom of your screen with the two kind of speech bubbles above it. And I will be back on at the end of the discussion to share the questions with Brecken and our three guests. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler website this coming Friday, October 2nd. Now I'll turn it over to Brecken, Billie, Nathan, and Danny, and I'll be back to field any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you so much to our guests for being here. I really appreciate it. We're on 3 different time zones here, so I'm super grateful to our West Coasters for agreeing to talk about photomicrography at 9 a.m. and Billie, of course, in Bangkok for hanging out with us. But I'm so excited to have these three gemologists with us today. We are going to be talking about photomicrography, which is, of course, taking photos of gemstone inclusions using a microscope. And I wanted to do this session because I think a lot of people, including myself, find them so interesting, but also because I thought it would be so cool to hear straight from you guys a little bit about the process that goes into it. So I'd love to start just by throwing it to you guys to hear, quickly how you got into photomicrography and your path into photographing gemstone inclusions.
I'll start that. So I started, it started, as a seed when I was a student at the GIA, but it really took hold when I was working at the GIA. I was working in the scope every day, and I really, really fell in love with being in the scope and, how it felt to see something new inside of a gemstone. And that was really the moment. And I have been trying ever since.
Cool.
I think I also started as a gemology student when I was taking the FGA class, which is the GEMA's gemology course. And we started in class just taking pictures on our cell phones. But I didn't really get into it until maybe a year later when we opened our laboratory. And for anybody that doesn't know, my parents are both gemologists. So when we opened our lab, they had decades of experience in testing stones, and I had just finished gemology school. And so it was like this whole new learning experience for me where I was seeing all these different stones every day, and I was learning so much, but I was having trouble keeping track of everything. And so what I realized is, if I had been in class or something, I would take notes. If you're in school, you do your homework, you take notes. But how do you take notes on what you see in the microscope? And so the natural thing is kind of to take photos of it. And so that's what I started doing. And I started compiling all these inclusion photos into a kind of a database that we put together, which is called Hyperion. And so that's how I really got started, was partially because I just thought they were so cool looking, but also partially as like a study tool or a learning tool when I was testing in the lab.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Nathan, what about you? Oh, I think he's a little bit frozen.
You're muted or something.
Yeah, Nathan, we can't hear you. Sorry. All right, maybe we'll just swing back around to Nathan. Still muted. So I wanted to know, obviously, the nickname, the Three Microteers. As we were promoting the session, we got so much feedback on how much they love the name. So for the sake of curiosity, Billie, I'll throw this one to you. Is there a story behind that?
Well, there is a little story. The Three Microteers actually started out a few years ago when we were making this book, Ruby and Sapphire, a gemologist guide. You can see it's a very comprehensive book about Ruby and Sapphire.
Fantastic, yeah.
And one of the chapters is about inclusions and microscopy. And there are special sections within the chapter, kind of like sidebars. And John Cuevila has one because he's really one of the original, most experienced and most well-known photomicrographers. But we also put in a section for kind of like younger, more up-and-coming photomicrographers. And Danny and Nathan and I, our work made up that section when we created this chapter. And so I think we, like, within a few months, we met each other in Tucson and we decided to take a picture together. I think we were taking a picture because we were together in this chapter in the book.
Right.
But my dad ended up being like, oh, you guys are like the Three Microteers or something. And the name kind of after that.
Yeah, you're stuck with it. It's great. Everyone loves it. I think it's so clever. So for our attendees who might not be as familiar with what goes into it, Danny, I'm going to throw this to you, especially because you have such a cool background. What does one need to take a photomicrograph?
So I mean, like Billy said, and my experience as well, when I first started, I was just putting a camera straight to the eyepiece. And I mean, but to date it a little bit, it wasn't like a phone built into a camera built into a phone. It was an actual like point and shoot camera. But it was so exhilarating to really be able to see the thing and pull it out of the scope just by any means necessary. And so really what you need a microscope. I mean, that's the biggest part. And then you really, these days, I mean, you can use your iPhone, whatever phone you have, and light and a stone. I mean, and you know, there's a lot of people probably tuning in for all kinds of reasons right now. Some people love the inclusions. Some people just love, you know, the small worlds within things. And depending on your reasons, sometimes you can just use a nice loop in your phone. Truly, that's all you need. That's all you need to get going.
Okay. And, you know, speaking to, we'll get to the more artsy side in a second of the photographs, but why are these important for gemology? What can they tell you?
Billy?
I think for us, inclusions can tell us so much about a stone. They can help us identify what type of material we're dealing with. So if you have a red stone and you look at it in the microscope, you might be able to tell from the inclusions whether that red stone is a red spinel or whether it's a ruby. So that's one thing that's really important for us in the lab. There are also a lot of features that help us distinguish natural from synthetic stones. So basically things that are made by nature versus things that are man-made. And then for us in particular, for our clients, they put a lot of emphasis on treatment and origin determination. And so looking at inclusions can help us with these features as well. So it can help us distinguish, you know, whether a sapphire has been heated or not, and help us distinguish where they come from, which is a really big priority for our clients in the lab. And I'm sure it is for Nathan's as well.
Yeah. Nathan, can you hear us okay?
I think so. I'm having some internet connection issues, and so I switched to a different network. Hopefully this other network will work a little bit better. So yeah, I don't know what was said for the last about 3 minutes.
Well, if you wanted to go back and just touch on how you got into photomicrography, and then we were just talking about the importance of these photomicrographs to the study of gemology. So you can just go ahead and jump in on that too, if you'd like.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. So I got started with photomicrography. I got my GG in about 2007, and then I started working for GIA. And I started out as a diamond grader, and then I transferred into the gem identification department. And that's where I had the good fortune to work with John Cuevila, who sort of became my mentor. And that's really where I was introduced to the microscopic world of gemstones and why the micro features you see are really so important, and also why it's important to document them with a photograph. And so that kind of ties into the other question of, you know, why are these things so important? And the main reason is it's the way we communicate information to other people. So when gemology is sort of observational science, and so you can't destroy your sample really, because people don't really like it when you crush up their valuable gemstone to do destructive testing. And so, but what you can do is you can make observations about the stone, and the way you share those observations is by documenting it with a photograph. And so in the GG course materials and in research publications, photomicrographs are used to communicate information about gem materials. And that's you know, from a gemology perspective, that's really the main reason why these things are important, is for communicating clearly these observations you see.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a difference in the way, have you guys noticed a difference in the way you sort of approach your photos, whether or not that's your technique or what you'd rather focus on?
Well, I think there's definitely a difference. So I think my style is a little bit, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my video is not really cooperating nicely, so I'm assuming everybody can hear okay.
Yeah, you're good.
So I think we all three have very different styles that we've kind of developed over the last few years. And my style is really more, I shoot with a lot of bright fields, so I use a lot of diffuser plates, and I really like to use color when possible. And so, you know, a lot of my photos, I look for bright, colorful things. And one of my favorite techniques is differential interference contrast. And that's a way that is, it's a false color technique where you apply high color contrast to low contrast subjects. And so I've kind of gravitated to that technique, and another technique called Reinberg illumination, where you use colored filters to highlight different structural features that are aligned within an inclusion scene. So, so I think a lot of my style is really centered around geometric patterns and bright colors. And I don't know that that's always the case with Billie and Danny. I'll let them explain their style.
Yeah, I agree with Nathan. I think we all have kind of our unique twist on the way that we approach photomicrography and the things that kind of catch our eye and interest us as well. I think for me, one of the things that's always really interested me is crystals, like the crystals that are inside other crystals. So it could be solid inclusions where you have like one mineral inside of another, but even things like negative crystals interest me a lot. So any kind of cavities that are inside of the gem, I often like to photograph that. I really like the idea that it's trapped space in there, maybe for millions and millions of years. And it kind of reminds me of like a natural snow globe. You know what I mean? When you're a little kid and and it always kind of reminds me of that. So yeah, I've noticed that ever since I started, even when I was photographing stuff like on my iPhone, I've always been drawn to crystals quite a bit. And I use a lot of fiber optic light when I shoot my photos. But I think like one thing that makes my photos different from Nathan's is I don't deal as much in color or like in adding color to the image.
Yeah, and for me, that's funny. The snow globe analogy really feels familiar, because a snow globe is like it's a little miniature place that you feel like you can explore even in 3 dimensions. And I feel like for my images, I'm always reaching for a full space to convey. And so I'm always reaching for depth in my images. And yeah, I think that's really what I focus on. And I also use I use actually strictly fiber optic lights pretty much. And of course, exploring opals, especially in matrix, and really trying to feature their play of color in a unique way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is a good segue. So I asked the panelists to send me a few of their favorites. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and pull those up, and we'll just go as we go through them. I'd love to hear from you guys, why you picked them, what you love about them, and maybe a little bit about, what they tell us. Sorry guys, let me just get rid of this. Back to the beginning. So this is Billie's. This is beautiful, Billie. What are we looking at?
So this is a negative crystal that's piercing a fingerprint inside of a sapphire. And I think this is really typical of the kind of stuff I photograph a lot. You know, we are based in Bangkok, so we see more ruby and sapphire in our lab than any other type of stone. And so I think that also has a tremendous impact on my work because I do often shoot clients' stones as well. And so I think that's one of the big themes you'll probably see in a lot of my photos is a lot of it is corundum, which is not always the easiest thing because it is doubly refractive. So sometimes you get like it's not quite as crisp as something like spinel, but you know, it's a material I see a lot of, and so it's something I really like. And I really liked this because it looked to me like something was flying through the sky. And
yeah,
so
it really does. It looks like a landscape. It reminded me of like an ocean actually, but it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it just really appealed to me. And I actually like Sri Lankan sapphire a lot. Like they just always seem to have really cool cavities and really cool inclusions to me.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy photographing as well.
Here's the other one you sent me. This is really cool.
Yeah, I really like this one as well. And it's actually a little bit unusual for me because it's in quartz, which I don't deal with as often as things like ruby, sapphire, spinel. And this was not a client submitted specimen. It's actually something that I bought in Tucson. I just saw this little, it's actually an amethyst, and it had these cool little cristobalite inclusions inside, and this one looked so much like a mushroom to me that I just had to have the specimen. So I bought the specimen in Tucson and brought it back here to shoot it. I actually, like, I've showed it to a few people. I've showed it to people when they come into our lab, like some of our clients. And I actually had somebody ask me, but how does the mushroom get inside the stone? Like they always think it was a real, like kind of like amber. I think they thought it was kind of like amber or something, you know, where it can trap like that.
Yeah.
That was really cool. That it really seems to get people's imagination working.
Yeah, it's pretty lifelike.
And it also to me looks like it's like floating around, you know, even though things have been kind of like stationary and trapped for, you know, millions of years. One of the things I like about them is they often look like they're moving, like they're in movement.
Yeah, definitely. And now we're gonna go with one of Danny's favorites.
Yeah, so spessartine in colorless topaz, 2 of them. And I love this one because, you know, you get the juicy, the color coming through of the garnets themselves, and also some thin film interference between the host and the inclusion. And then of course, just this sense, like Billie says, the sense of floating and the sense of sort of being trapped, and, you know, also, they're paired like a satellite and a planet forever, just forever, millions and millions of years.
Yeah, I love that comparison. This is really something. The colors are beautiful.
That's a fun one. So
Awesome.
this is Opal from Mexico. And so that's like a radial growth of quartz, kind of like a quartz donut, I guess, growing out of another inclusion covered in quartz. It's and then the play of color. This was a Contourless opal, so the play of color was behind the sort of inclusion scene. So I'm lighting the quartz from behind with the play of color. Real tricky, real fun shot. This one I also had to polish just to get this angle correct. I had shot it previously through a cabochon, and it just was not working out. So I put a flat window into it just so I can frame it. I mean, it's a little bit of guesswork because you're polishing and faceting, or faceting and polishing, hoping that you're getting it right, checking it along the way.
Right. How common is having to do that? You have to do that often?
I try not to because it's work, but and I'm lazy. But I mean, if I really want the shot, if I really can see the shot, and it's just not coming, then I'll have to tweak the stone. I'm lucky enough that I own the stone, so I can mess with them, as to Nathan's earlier point.
Right.
But yeah, I do it I do it maybe every 6th or 7th photo.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay.
I did it for this one as well, because this one was such a small field of view. I think it was like 1.3 millimeter field of view, or 4 or 5. And the curvature of a cabochon, there's no chance of getting a nice, clean, resolved shot through that. So I had to put a polish in it. And this is the same sort of phenomenon, not the same phenomenon, but it's a Contourless opal. So I'm lighting it from behind with the play of color. And this is, I'm not entirely sure, it's most likely, Nathan, I have never asked you about this one, but it's likely opal. That little spheroid is likely opal. It could be small chalcedony.
Probably chalcedony for the sphere.
Chalcedony spheroid, growing on another inclusion, and just a totally otherworldly scene.
Yeah.
I just love it. Yeah.
Definitely looks extraterrestrial. Okay, then we got Nathan's first one.
This one's probably one of my favorite photos I've taken, and just like with Billie's mushroom photo, I think all of us are probably interested in photos or inclusion scenes that we see in gems that look like something else that we're familiar with. So this one, this is a real thin tablet of iris agate, and it's kind of carved on the back in this kind of rolling grooved pattern. And when I was playing with it, so what it looked like to me was like a frozen lake with the tree line of a forest at night with the Aurora borealis. And so this one took quite a while to set up and shoot the way I wanted it to look. But to me, I think it seems to capture the spirit of the Aurora borealis pretty well. And I ask a lot of students that come through lab tours and things like that what it looks like, and everybody except one person has agreed that that's what it looks like. And I had one student who said that they'd been to the Aurora borealis and it looks nothing like this. So, you can't make them all happy. But anyway,
very cool.
This is this photo here. This is the technique I was talking about with differential interference contrast. And so this is the surface of a diamond from Wyoming, from the Kelsey Lake area, and using a specialized type of microscopy, you have to have specialized hardware on a compound type microscope, and the hardware basically splits the light into 2 perpendicular light paths, and then you have light that travels through the objective lens, bounces off the surface of the stone, and then travels back through the objective lens. And the light that's coming in through the lens and then bouncing back through the other way, it interferes with each other, and you get a different interference color depending on the distance that the light travels. And so when you have this kind of irregular topography on the surface of a stone, where you have raised sections and lower sections that are side by side, you get these different colors that stand out in high contrast. And so this is that technique where this diamond otherwise is just, there's really no color, it's a colorless diamond, but I can add this color with this microscopy technique, which makes it much more vivid and also gives you a lot more contrast in the detail that you wouldn't see otherwise.
Yeah, just beautiful. Oh, wow.
This is a fun stone. Over the last few years, I've gotten really interested in fossilized dinosaur bone. And this stone's actually belongs to the John Cuevla collection, but this one's particularly fun because it, again, like the mushroom and like the iris agate, this one looks like a tire track in some mud or something, where you have this kind of pattern that looks like it shouldn't be there in this dark background. But this fossilized dinosaur bone, where the pore spaces in the bone have been infilled with chalcedony and carbonates, and you have these basically what amounts to little miniature geodes in some cases, where the core of these pore spaces are hollow. And then you have iron oxides like hematite and ilmenite, which provide this kind of bright red and bright yellow contrasting color to the black bone material.
So cool. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing those. I'm going to stop sharing now. Those were amazing. I'm curious, do you guys have varieties of stones or inclusions that prove to be the hardest, or is there one that's you've come up against that you found really difficult to shoot?
Well, I think opals are really difficult to shoot, but Danny seems to have that figured out. So I like to just leave the opals to Danny, but otherwise, go ahead, Danny.
That's funny because I find diamonds really hard to shoot.
Why is that?
Why diamonds?
Yeah. I never see diamonds, so.
Yeah, well, I rarely see diamonds, but whenever I try, there's I think it's their refractive index, and there's so many hot spots. So the refractive index, because getting light to behave the way you want it to as as it's entering, is really tricky compared to most other stones. Opals, their RI is so low, you can get that light pretty much straight in the way you want it to go, whereas diamonds, it's reflecting off every which way, and to really target an inclusion or a scene is tricky, real tricky.
That probably works with Danny's style to shoot opals, because they do really well with the pinpoint fiber optic lighting, which he uses a lot of.
Yeah.
I like to use a lot of diffusers and things like that, and that plays much nicer with diamonds. So I think maybe our style helps to contribute to the types of materials we like to shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. It seems like you guys have all sort of found your niche in the way that you work with it. I'm curious also, have you guys noticed, or how you notice people, how they perceive your photos? Because it sort of seems like, Gems and Gemology has their Facebook page, and hashtag Microscope Monday is always hugely popular. And I know every time you guys post your photos, people love them. And Billie, for example, you have some photos in an exhibition at Le Cole in Hong Kong. And Danny, I know your photos have also appeared in numerous platforms. So are you noticing sort of a changing response in how people are seeing them as art as well?
Billie?
For me, I think there have always been some people that appreciate inclusions and enjoy them. But I think that group is growing larger and larger. I think probably the internet helps a lot with that.
Yeah, for sure.
We opened our lab about 6 years ago, and I was like a fresh gemology student, like really excited about inclusions and sharing them with everyone. And I would take an inclusion photo of one of our client stones, and I would call the client up and be like, oh, look at this photo, it's in your stone, it's so cool. And they would be like, it's fine if you want to take that, but please don't put our name next to it when you share that, okay? We don't want people to think that our stones have flaws in them. We don't want our clients to see that. And that was kind of the reaction that I got a few years ago. And now we have some people who bring us stones to the lab just because they say, oh, there's this really cool crystal in it. Can you please take a picture and figure out what it is? So I think in that respect, it has changed. I think the thing that Le Cole has done in Paris and Hong Kong is also kind of a sign of that change, where they really saw the beauty in it, and they see it as more of a fingerprint of that gemstone, that it's natural and that it's a unique identifying feature. And I think people are viewing that as a positive instead of as a negative. I also saw, we had one stone come in, I think a bit over a year ago, into the lab. And it was a ruby, and we ended up finding these red crystals in it, and it was starlight, which had not been found before in ruby. And I told the client, because I know this client is somebody who's really passionate about gems, and he ended up saying, you know what, we were gonna sell this at an auction anyways. I'm gonna get them to put this inclusion photo into the auction catalog. And that's what he did. And so I think that shows that there are at least some people in the industry that are really starting to think about it as a very positive feature.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's always been perceived as an art form in a lot of ways. John Cuevla has an exhibit here at GIA in a hallway with all, blown up art prints of photomicrographs. But I think the change is probably really social media, where, you know, before to see that kind of artwork, you'd have to be on the campus at GIA, but now with, you know, Instagram, we all have Instagram accounts, and it's real easy to access this kind of content. So I think we have a lot of people who are exposed to this kind of thing that wouldn't have been otherwise, just by the technology that's available now.
Yeah, definitely.
The access is huge. That's hugely important. When I first started, you know, I was basically doing Google image searches and just trolling on forums, you know, gemological forums, seeing what there was out there. There was no, I mean, there were the photo atlases, and that was it. And if you didn't own the photo atlases, then you're just sort of scraping what you can off the internet. Now it's everywhere. It's Pinterest or Instagram or, you know, Facebook, whatever it is. It's everywhere. It's great. It's great. I wish I had that.
Yeah. Do you guys have any tips before we go to audience questions? I'm just curious if you have any tips for people who are wanting to get into it and just getting going.
Practice a lot. I mean, I know Danny spent a lot of hours, and I spent a lot of hours just trying to figure out how it all works. And, you know, I took a lot of really bad photos at first, but, you know, you have to go through those kind of growing pains until you start seeing good results. So, you know, I think the important thing is to, you know, when you start out, not to get too discouraged until you know, spend some time to try to figure out how to light things properly. And it really comes down to, you know, some patience and a lot of practice.
Yeah, I too took a lot of bad photos, like Nathan's bad photos. I took a lot of bad photos too. I get a good amount of emails asking, oh, how do I start? And, you know, I think a good tip is to really understand what you're in for. If you want to, you know, you want to pursue this as a hobby, you do need to spend a lot of time, and there is a monetary component to it. It's not cheap to get a microscope, and that's why I started off by saying you could, you know, a loupe is great to start exploring stones just with your, you know, if you got a phone, just learning how to hold it right. But there is a cost, and that is always a barrier, I find, to most people really getting going. You have to love it. You have to love it in order to commit the entirety of the resources that it takes to just like actually pursue it with intention. And that's fun. Yeah.
I feel like it's also, for me, the microscopy is just as important as the photography. You know, like you really have to have experience, not just taking pictures, but also have experience with your microscope and manipulating the stone, and varying your lighting conditions too quite a bit. And when I was getting started, I found that made a huge difference, is that I would get stuck kind of in dark field because we were testing stones, and you know, it's always on. And so it was kind of like the easy way to do it. But the more I started using things like fiber optic light, the more I realized I was missing a whole lot of the stone. And I just seeing all of the features. And I think it's really important to have a lot of practice, not just taking photos, but also using the microscope in general.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For sure.
So before we go on to our listener questions, I just wanted to see if you guys wanted to throw out any platforms, websites, resources, that kind of thing, share with our audience of where they can find you in your photos. Is Instagram easiest? I know you guys are all very active. I'm going to actually drop in our chat a few different links of places, and I know Lotus Gemology obviously has some great ones, and here's our Instagram handles. Is there anything else you guys wanted to mention before we went to Q&A?
I'd like to mention, you know, the Facebook Gems and Gemology group that was started not that long ago, which is a good platform for all content gemological. You know, I like to post a lot of photomicrographs on there, but there's a lot of other good gemological content on that platform too.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great resource.
For me, my Instagram is where I put most of my images. That's pretty much where, that's where I post them.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Billy.
Yeah, for us, we have like a few different, and I think Brecken just dropped the links in. We
Yeah.
have different like ways to experience it. Like one is through our books. So if you're really into it, you can get some of our books like this, where we have full page inclusion photos. But the other thing is also on our website, we have a section that's called Hyperion, which Brecken just put the link in the chat. And so Hyperion is our searchable inclusion database, and we've already put over 1,000 images into it, and we add to that all the time. I mean, like we just took a few more this week, so it's something we're adding to regularly. And the really cool thing about it is it's not just browsing one photo after another, but each photo has a caption explaining the significance gemologically. But you can also do searches. So you can search things like you can compare and contrast natural rubies with synthetic rubies, for example, if you want to learn about the differences between those. Or you can also do just a keyword search. So if you just want to look at what apatite inclusions look like apatite crystals, you can just type in the word apatite and it'll show you apatite in savarite and apatite in spinel and apatite in a sapphire and stuff like that. So I think that's a really powerful resource, and it's available for free, so anybody can just go onto our website.
Yeah, and I've also found Hyperion useful for origin. So, I know I've had to search for, what do, inclusions in spinel from Tajikistan look like. And so you can search the location and the material there and get some examples of that material. So Hyperion's been really great in my experience also.
I also use it at work. Yeah.
Oh, and the exhibition, we have an exhibition going on if you're in Hong Kong with Van Cleef School of Jewelry Arts, and it's just been extended through the end of October. So for the lucky people that are in Hong Kong, you can still go visit that.
That's awesome. I wish they would bring that to New York. I'd love to see it. Well, thank you guys so much. We are going to go. I think, Michelle, we're ready for our listener questions now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Brecken, Billie, Nathan, and Danny. That was a great discussion, and those pictures were unbelievable. And thanks to our sponsor, RDI Diamonds. As a reminder, you can still type questions into the Zoom Q&A box there at the bottom of your screen. And we had a lot that came in beforehand and a lot that came in during the conversation, but we'll try to get to as many as possible. While we compile the Q&A, I just wanted to say a quick word about RDI Diamonds. RDI Diamonds, the selection you want, the quality you need. Thousands of diamonds, that's just the beginning. RDI offers a wide range of services and support to help you succeed. From flexible memo options, a partnership with De Beers Group Industry Services, to generous stock options and cost-efficient shipping. RDI's goal is to provide the highest quality of both care and diamonds to your store. Visit rdidiamonds.com today to learn more. That's rdidiamonds.com. And now let's get started with our listener questions. So a lot of the questions that came in are about equipment. And kind of a lot of them revolve around this. Basically, how can somebody acquire a microscope, a canner, and a lighting system that's of adequate quality but isn't too expensive? I think people are wondering for like hobbyists or home micrography. Can you suggest something that just for people that kind of want to casually pursue it?
Sure. So, for me, I think it's always good to get the best microscope that you can afford within your budget. And one of the best ways is to buy used equipment. And so I think all three of us shoot on research grade equipment. However, a lot of that equipment is rather cost prohibitive. So on the secondhand market, you can get really good equipment for a fraction of the price. The trade-off might be that you might have to kind of refurbish things a little bit, or you might get things that aren't fully working. So it can be a little bit more cumbersome to get started. But, for my microscope at home, for differential interference contrast, I acquired most of the parts on the secondhand market, and it took probably 2 years or so to get all the parts and pieces to make that happen. But the cost was, probably around $1,200, as opposed to if I went out and bought a new microscope, it might be $75,000 for equivalent research grade modern instrument. So the used market is a good place to start, but it does take a lot more research to know what your getting, and it can be a little bit more frustrating as far as things maybe not working. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, it really is a matter of just landing on a budget for yourself, doing the research, as Nathan said, around what's the best you can afford, and really secondhand market. I mean, everything here is secondhand market. Everything, with the exception of the camera and this mast here. Everything is pretty much secondhand. Set alerts for yourself and be patient. And when I was looking, I learned most things from two forums. One is gemologyonline.com. It used to be, it still is. It's not as visited as it used to be, but it's still very well moderated by experts. And oh my goodness, I'm blanking.
Photomicrography.net.
Thank you, Nathan. Photomicrography.net. That is a treasure trove of information for any microscopy or photomicrography endeavors. Yeah.
I spend a lot of time trolling around there also, as you know.
Absolutely.
And Danny, since you're talking a little bit about your equipment there, we had a listener question come in. Can you explain your setup for us?
Chaos. I didn't clean up beforehand, just so everyone could see. So this is a wild microscope. Wild Hebrew is actually how you pronounce it. It's spelled wild, but it's Wild. This is specifically for photomicrography because of the trinocular port where the camera is sitting. This is the light source back here, and these are the fiber optic light guides that bring the light to the subject here. This is just a heavy duty vibration isolation table. A lot of this is sort of unnecessary, but necessary depending on what you're doing. I got some monitors so I can see what I'm doing. Well, there's a monitor here. And there is one here hidden, but so I can see what I'm doing in real time. And these guys hold the lights in place. They're called friction arms. So you can move them as you want and then screw them down and then they stay in place. I mean, that's that's a lot, but it's also sort of the basic idea.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I hope that was helpful.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. So we have a very specific equipment question, and I'm going to mispronounce the name of this brand, and I apologize in advance. We have a Leisha trinocular and use an Axelis AccuScope camera, 5 years old. Are there newer ones that you would recommend? And that word I was trying to pronounce is Leica. I don't know exactly how you say that.
Leica.
Leica. Okay, sorry. So a Leica trinocular and an Axelis AccuScope camera, 5 years old. Are there newer models that you would recommend?
Well, it probably depends on which exact model of Leica trinocular scope. I assume we're talking about a Leica stereoscope. And so most any Leica microscopes are generally pretty good. The camera, I can't say that I'm familiar with. I don't know if Danny or Billy has heard of that either, but the cameras that I use, I typically use a DSLR. Canon 6D is what I use at home, and then I have some at work. I have Nikon full frame microscope specific cameras, but I know Danny uses a Canon DSLR also. I think he uses a 5DSR. And then Billy, what camera do you use?
I also use a Canon.
So seems like Canon's popular.
Actually, the 6. So yeah.
So there might be some room to improve on the camera, but the microscope itself sounds like it should be fine.
I'm confident it's fine too. Of course it matters how that camera has been mounted to the microscope. Right. So if you're looking to change cameras, then you have to get a different mount.
Yeah.
But I'm not, yes, I use a Canon, but as you can see, there's no Canon lenses here. So I've not invested, like most photographers, they invest in the lenses over time. And so they have to, they have a particular brand loyalty because maybe they like it, but also there's this sunk cost in the lenses where if tomorrow I needed to change to a Nikon or a Sony, I could do it with very minor adjustments.
So I think maybe just any kind of, you know, well-known DSLR or mirrorless type professional digital camera would be possibly an upgrade.
Okay, thank you. And Billie, I'm going to throw this next one to you because you got into this a little bit earlier when you were talking about inclusions. What internal inclusions best identify lab-grown diamonds from natural diamonds, and how do lab-grown diamonds compare to natural stones? You talked a little bit about inclusions earlier, so I think people are very curious about this particular stone.
I feel like maybe Nathan would be better for this. We don't actually test diamonds at all in our lab. We only do colored stones. So,
okay.
So I just don't work with diamonds.
Sure. For a lot of lab-grown diamonds, you might, you know, lab-grown diamonds are in pretty pure environments where, you know, generally you got carbon present and that's about it. So most lab-grown diamonds are not going to have inclusions of foreign minerals like you would see in a lot of natural stones. You know, in natural diamonds, you can get, you know, spinel, garnet, diopside, small colorless crystals. So in a lot of lab-grown diamonds, it's really more the absence of things that would suggest it's natural. You know, but diamonds are really tough as far as inclusions go. You really can't always rely on inclusions.
Nathan, we lost you. We lost your audio again.
And so yeah, so really inclusions in synthetic diamonds, you might see some dark spots that are graphitized areas where maybe the carbon atoms didn't really play nice with the diamond and they've kind of reverted to graphite. But those are the types of things that you would commonly see, but otherwise a lot of synthetic diamonds are going to be free of inclusions. Or if it's a HPHT flux grown diamond, you might have these sort of metallic inclusions in there from the nickel metallic flux. But I think those types of diamonds are getting less common in favor of CVD grown diamonds, which wouldn't have those inclusions. But so yeah, I mean, generally these days synthetic diamonds are often pretty clean.
Okay. How do you, and this question is for anyone who wants to take it, how do you photograph stars and cat's eyes?
Well, so usually you have to have a point light source like fiber optic light to cause the reflection to occur, you know, from whatever the inclusion is that is creating the asterism or the chatoyancy. So yeah, typically if I have a star stone or a stone with asterism, the starting place is going to be a fiber optic light. And then from there, I might bring in additional light, maybe transmitted light if there's some body color to the stone that I'm trying to show. But typically it's going to be a single point light source for stones with that kind of effect for chatoyancy and asterism.
Nailed it.
Thank you. And Danny, you talked about this a little bit earlier, but someone wants to know any suggestions for taking a photo via the microscope with a cell phone. I think you mentioned earlier you could do this with a cell phone and a loop, right?
Definitely. But was the question with a cell phone and a microscope, or?
Yeah. Any suggestions for taking a photo via the microscope with a cell phone?
Yeah, it's. I heard Ed Boehm give a whole talk on this. It's really straightforward. It's really actually pretty easy, depending on your phone. But really, my suggestion is they do actually, and I believe Nathan has a little bit of experience there. They make some caddies for microscopes that attach to an ocular. They're 3D printed. They're plastic, and they you know, they can squeeze the phone and hold it just so they have. There it is, a little.
I happen to have one.
They have like a Z-X and Y-axis that you can
yeah,
move
so
the phone around.
you just attach your phone kind of in here, and then you, well, it's a little bit fidgety, but you know, it's an okay place to start. So you just kind of throw your phone in here, and then attach the ocular. You kind of attach it like this, and then the camera is just kind of looking through the ocular.
It's a great solution. It really is. I loved it. When I first started seeing these come onto the market, really like trickling in, and there's not a big market for them, so they're a real specialty product. But I love the idea. I mean, it makes anyone a photomicrographer, and
Yeah,
everyone
absolutely.
everyone loves it so much. Yeah.
And you don't always have to have an adapter like that. You can do it by holding the camera or the phone over your ocular, but you know, you usually want to kind of stabilize it with your, you know, couple of fingers in between the ocular and the microscope, so it's not shifting all over the place. It's a little bit clumsy, but it can definitely be done with some practice.
Yeah. Definitely takes some finesse if you're doing it with your hands.
Yeah.
Well, I think you mentioned earlier when Bracken was asking for tips for practice.
Yeah.
We're getting short on time here. I had just 2 more questions I wanted to ask. And this was more of a comment that came in, but it brought up a question for me. Somebody comment on Danny's input in Uncut Gems. Did you do something for Uncut Gems?
So,
Uncut Gems, the movie that came out last year with Adam Sandler.
Yeah. So the Softy brothers did reach out early on and pivoted away, but I have since spoken with the VFX creator, the lead VFX person, and he was very complimentary. And he said indeed and there's some interviews online that you can see. They were leaned heavily on my images. That's pretty much my input. It was very passive. I didn't do much, but they used a lot of my material for their source material.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And so this is my last question. A couple of you mentioned, buying some of the stones you liked, so you photographed them. A couple of mentioned that the stones were from certain collections. So who has actual ownership of these photographs, and do you sell them? Do you make them available?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So for my case, when I shoot photos at work for GIA has ownership, and a lot of those photos are used for research publications and work-related projects. But then all the photos that I post on Instagram are stones that I shoot at my house, and then I have ownership of those. And when I first started, there was a lot of requests for prints and things like that. So I do have an Etsy shop for prints for people who want them. And I think Danny has an Etsy shop also, or is that correct, Danny? Is that
I do.
Etsy?
I have an online shop too, and my photos I own the stones and I own the photos. That's a simpler answer.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in between where I own all the photos. It's a little bit different than Nathan because for our business, we own our own business. So anything we shoot in the lab, we still own the photos as well. Now, a lot of the specimens I shoot, I do not own. I only own a few of those. But for the photos, they're ours.
And Billie, do you have an Etsy shop or anything?
I don't yet. Like, we do have a lot of requests for prints and things like that. So far, we've only been doing them as one-offs. So for us, I think the easiest way right now to buy the images is to buy our books.
Okay.
And I suggest buying the books. They're amazing. I
also suggest the same.
Yeah, I have my copies and I love them. Love them.
And I believe we've written about the books before, correct, Bracken?
We have, definitely, Inside Out, and we covered Ruby and Sapphire quite a few times as well. So.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone again for joining us today. We had a couple more questions come in about equipment, like a specific equipment questions, but we're out of time here today, and I'm sorry I didn't get to everyone. I was trying to jump around as much as I could. So everybody's Instagram handle is up there. I'm sure if you have questions for them, they'd be happy to answer them. You can DM them on Instagram if you have questions about certain equipment, what you should buy, how it works. You can tune in for another episode of My Next Question next Wednesday, October 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern, where I'll be interviewing Lang Antiques Emily Friedrichs and jeweler Kathy Calhoun about the history behind suffragist jewelry. So that should be a fun one. And you can read more about it on our website. I'm going to drop that link into the chat right now. You read more about it, and you can read more about other upcoming webinars we have and sign up for those. And at nationaljeweler.com/webinars. That link is up in the chat. And thanks again to everyone for joining us today, and please take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.